If the courts make a ruling and the administration decides to run over the courts, what then? What can Congress do? You say it's our job in Congress to stand up to it.
There's two major functions here. One is the oversight of what they're doing, right? And one of the things that we haven't even talked about is that our Republican colleagues have been acquiescing in all of this. I know this. I've seen a few of them stand up from time to time. Maybe they'll stand up to cancer trials being cut.
Has Klobuchar been in the United States Senate through the entirety of the Trump era or not? Because no, they won't. Okay, so Senator Klobuchar is yet another example of a Democratic lawmaker who was asked, all right, well, you say that the Democrats are gonna fight back against Trump, his administration, and what Republicans are up to. How do you intend to do that? She immediately leans on, hopefully Republicans will do the right thing. Wow, great leadership there. Now, what did you think about it, Cenk?
Yeah, so look, it's a disaster for several different reasons, including hoping that Republicans do the right thing is the Democratic strategy. Okay, that makes no sense at all. But I actually think that it's even worse than that, and I want to talk about their hypocrisy as well, but in a minute.
All right, well, let me give you all the details first. So look, they were talking about the Trump administration and their attempt to basically cut billions of dollars in funding from the National Institute of Health for biomedical research. Now, academics at universities and medical centers immediately rebuked this idea. As outlined in an NIH memo, the policy would cap the amount of funding for what are called indirect costs for general expenses like facilities and administration at 15%, down from an average of around 27 to 28%. So the NIH, this is really interesting, said that the change could actually save the American government more than $4 billion a year, and argued that lower rates for indirect costs are actually more in line with the grants from private foundations. So private foundations apparently are making do with that 15% cap, right? Or something similar to that. But several researchers said that NIH's high rate of funding for indirect costs helps subsidize the infrastructure necessary for their work, everything from a building's heating and electricity to personnel. All right, I wanna pause for a second and just say, look, of course, people at NIH are gonna say, no, we need more money. Like, they're gonna make that argument. So I'm not as heated about this potential cap in grants to the NIH specifically for the indirect costs, right? That's what we're talking about here. I would need to see more evidence indicating that they need to get grants that come, where the average is about 27 to 28% as opposed to 15%. But anyway, putting that aside for a second, a stat examination of publicly available financial records and internal emails did show that some top universities and medical centers stand to lose $100 million or more a year if the 15% cap is implemented, including prestigious institutions in conservative states that voted for President Donald Trump. Now, over the weekend, some laboratories even began the process of shutting down. So they claim that this has already had some impact. Kimron Rathmel, who is a cancer researcher who led the National Cancer Institute under the Biden administration, says that this policy shift would have both health and economic consequences. She says that this abrupt change in the way grants are funded will have devastating consequences on medical science. Many people will lose jobs, clinical trials will halt, and this will slow down progress toward cures for cancer and effective prevention of illness. Now, yesterday, the federal judge named Angel Kelly temporarily blocked the National Institutes of Health from implementing the budget cuts after 22 states sued to essentially stop this change from happening. And so Kelly later expanded on this pause on the NIH cost cutting nationwide in response to the suits from dozens of research institutions. And it's one of the many Trump policies that the courts are now weighing in on. They've stepped in to temporarily block what the Trump administration is trying to do here, which outraged the administration. So this is all context, okay? This is where the story starts to get juicy. As we shared with you yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance took to X to essentially indicate or hint at the notion that the Trump administration might not follow through on orders coming from federal judges. He wrote, if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general in how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. So there were falsehoods in there that we addressed yesterday, but the whole point is maybe we don't listen to what the federal judges order us to do. And other Republicans also fell in line with this idea, including Senator Mike Lee, who accused the judiciary of trying to stage a coup. Okay, now in response, Amy Klobuchar, senator, says that Congress, courts, and the constituents need to fight back against attempts to undermine the judiciary branch. But she also hopes that some of these Republicans in Congress are good guys and they'll step in and fight the Trump administration if they do in fact try to ignore what the courts are ordering. So let's take a look.
I've seen a few of them stand up from time to time. Maybe they'll stand up to cancer trials being cut. Watch for it. Maybe they'll stand up to Kash Patel, which they sure better do, as this man who has shown no regard for the truth is about to become head of the FBI unless they stand up for it. But they have to stand up to make this really work. Then you have oversight, and you can also pass legislation to make very clear what the limits are on this power.
So Cenk, clearly she is hoping that some Republican members of Congress will join the Democrats in pushing back against the Trump administration, especially as it pertains to what they might do in ignoring some of the federal judges, right? I mean, is she delusional, or am I delusional for thinking she's delusional?
No, she's definitely delusional. So let me start with the hypocrisy, but I want to come back around. I have a lot to say, but come around to why one thing that Anna just said is a really smart strategy by the Republicans, unfortunately. So first, on the hypocrisy. So Democratic leaders, people like Amy Klobuchar, said that Trump wasn't like a fascist, which is, by the way, what I said, because I thought he tried to steal the 2020 election, and that's a form of authoritarianism that I can't stand. And by the way, now he's ignoring the courts, exactly what I was worried about. But they didn't say like a fascist. They said Nazi over and over again. So let me get this right. In your mind, Amy Klobuchar, a Nazi wins the presidency, which is already like shocking, right? And then you got 3 months for his inauguration, and then on day one, he's gonna come out guns blazing, right? You didn't prepare at all in those 3 months for a Nazi assault on our democracy. Instead, your best plan is, I hope the other side does something about it. I mean, you can't argue that that's there's no argument at all. It's indisputable. World's worst plan.
I mean, it's not.
So the politicians that Donald Trump has bullied and cowed into complete and utter submission, I hope they become moral and do the right thing. But I thought you said they were Nazis. When would they become moral? Like, did you mean it or did you not mean it? I had concerns, and unfortunately my concerns have proven to be right. You guys pretended your concerns were way higher. Like the concentration camps are starting, et cetera, and you didn't prepare a single thing. That is unreal. Democratic incompetence is 100 out of 100.
So look, it's not just incompetence though, Cenk, because I think that this is not to erase the nefarious things that Donald Trump in fact did do, including the refusal to accept the results of the 2020 election, what happened on January 6th, the fake electors plot, all of that is true. I am not minimizing that. However, my issue with the Democrats is that they believe that they could just simply latch onto that narrative and that, campaign call basically, and not really offer the American people or their Democratic base a damn thing when they were campaigning. And so they thought that was enough. That's all we need to do. We just need to scare the voters enough to win, the electoral college votes necessary to get into the executive branch. That's all they thought they needed to do. In the meantime, they've gotten super rusty in regard to connecting with the American people and understanding what it is that they want, what these lawmakers can do to make their lives better. And this was all happening as Donald Trump and his team clearly were planning, plotting. He came into office ready to do his agenda. On day one.
Okay, so that's one more example, then I want to get to cancer in the courts. So if you thought Project 2025 was coming, and I did, and we had that discussion yesterday on the show about, hey, what happened with it, et cetera. Now Russell Vought is the head of OMB, and he's was the guy who came up with Project 2025. So I agreed with the Democrats there. Okay, so then why didn't any of you prepare to counter Project 2025? And not just before the election, which would have been nice, but after the election and before inauguration. Again, 3 months. You didn't have one plan other than, I hope the other side reins in Donald Trump. And by the way, her hope is that the other side's politicians rein him in, not the voters, which is a huge distinction I'm gonna come back to. Okay, now on to cancer. Look, she's like, I hope they realize their ways. No. Your job is to go out on TV and get all of your colleagues to go on TV, radio, newspapers, podcasts, online media, et cetera, and go, Trump's pro-cancer, Trump's pro-cancer, Trump's pro-cancer. Now then you might say, well, that's a little bit much, right? Okay, but now you've opened up and I wouldn't say he's pro-cancer because I'm doing honest reporting here, right? But if you're a Democrat and you're trying to counter Trump, you want to frame it in a way where you get people to ask the question, whoa, that's like a big thing to say, he's pro-cancer. Okay, so what do you mean by that? Well, he just cut funding for cancer research. We're a lot less likely to cure cancer if you cut funding for cancer research. Let's take it to the American people. Are you in favor of cutting funding for cancer research or not? I want a poll on it. Okay, you take action. But that's not just for your good feelings. It's so that those polls then get the Republican senators worried. You run polls in the Republican states, in Republican districts, showing how unpopular it is to cut cancer research. Even if you don't want to say Trump is pro-cancer, you can say, okay, you know what? At least put your message out there, do the poll, and put actual political pressure on the Republicans to vote no. Because the thing is, you do need Republicans to vote no. But just hoping they do is dumb. Putting incredible pressure on them, getting their numbers to start heading down to the point where they're nearly sure they're going to lose. That is how you effectuate political change. Isn't it amazing that not a single Democrat in Congress knows that? They never, ever do that. That is unreal. The second thing I would do is what Anna said. So I'd say, hey, look, we as Democrats are representing the American people. How? I want them to do the cancer research, but once they do, if we're gonna give it to a drug company, I want equity in that company. The American people are the taxpayers funded that research, and they should get equity in the company we give it to. What are you giving it to for free? Why? Why free? Why free? If this was a private corporation and we gave them cancer research, we would get a giant chunk of that corporation. Right. I want a giant chunk on behalf of the American taxpayers. Why are they robbing us?
Yeah, okay? I mean, look, honestly, our federal government has set up a system in which we as American taxpayers are investing in pharmaceutical companies for cancer research, drug research, whatever it is. Okay, and what kind of return do we get on our investment as the investors in these companies for their research and development? Price gouge, that's what we get. And that is a huge injustice. And so would any Democrat or Republican come out and say this is a broken system and we need to change it? We need equity in these companies if we're gonna be having American taxpayers invest in these companies like this? No, they wouldn't do it. I mean, we have the donor class. The donor class is not gonna take kindly to that. But I do wanna just quickly go back to the issue of the Trump administration ignoring the courts. And I'm gonna give Cenk some credit because, look, believe it or not, there were some pretty prominent Democrats who were suggesting that maybe it's not such a bad idea to ignore what the federal courts have to say about some of these issues. So let's go back to 2023. So back in 2023, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had suggested that you know, we don't like the way a federal judge in Texas has ruled on the FDA's approval of Mifepristone, which is a common abortion pill. Essentially, the FDA wanted to make it easier to send the drug by mail. And so that was challenged by conservatives through the courts, and a federal judge essentially ruled against what the Democrats wanted, ruled against the FDA in this case. And so at that point, AOC goes on television, and let's take a quick look at what she had to say.
I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy, and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
You know, I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
So AOC suggested that, and I couldn't remember what our commentary was when we covered this story, because we did cover this story on our show. And I gotta give you credit, Cenk, because you are consistent. Let's take a look.
There are two different scenarios here, and they're very different. One is where we are today with two different conflicting federal judge orders. Now, if the Biden administration says, listen, I don't know which one to follow. I want to follow the orders, but I don't know which one to follow. So that's why the Texas judge can't trump the Washington state judge. I'm gonna have to let this go to appeals courts, and then maybe even the Supreme Court if the appeals courts disagree, before I implement the judge's decision, okay? So I think that is very understandable, and there's a really good argument to be made there. When it gets to the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court says, no, that's it, you can't sell this drug anymore, and it makes no sense, but a lot of things the Supreme Court says makes no sense. Overturning a Supreme Court, not listening to a Supreme Court decision is very dangerous. So the Supreme Court is horrific. I can't stand the Supreme Court. But if we have a Democratic administration not listen to a Supreme Court decision, man, that's gonna open the floodgates. The Republicans aren't gonna listen to any court decision that they don't agree with. They're gonna do it instantly, and they're gonna do it 200 times more than the Democrats are. So I would be super worried about that precedent.
So Cenk had very similar commentary in regard to the Trump administration not following through on what a federal judge had ordered in regard to federal grants. They had frozen federal grants. A federal judge said, you can't do that. He blocked that executive order. And while the Trump administration rescinded their notice on freezing federal grants, through their actions, they did the opposite, right? They continued on with the freeze, and a federal judge called them out on doing that. And so you had the same, treatment toward the Trump administration as you did toward the notion that Democrats not follow through on what the Supreme Court orders. And I commend you on that, because you're right. I mean, look, at the end of the day, a constitutional crisis is not in anyone's interest. Yeah. Anyone's interest.
Look, it's important to have principles, because if you don't, you're unmoored. And then if we're all unmoored and there are no rules and laws and constitution, et cetera, then we're in dark times, and that's not the America we know and love. And it doesn't matter if a Democrat does it or a Republican does it. Now, look, last couple of things here. In terms of how to deal with the other side. So her, Klobuchar's idea is, let's all pray and hope that Republicans do the right thing on their own without any push or anything like that. It's an absurd, it's an unbelievable plan. That's not a plan. That's literally saying I want to do nothing, right? So, but you have to, if you actually wanted to be effective, what you would do is you would distinguish between two different things, okay? Or two different buckets. One is, who are you trying to address? Are you trying to address Trump? Are you trying to address Republican politicians? Or are you trying to address their voters? So oftentimes Trump is immovable if you're a Democrat trying to push against them. The Republican politicians are arguably more immovable because there's so more to Donald Trump that they're just waiting for their orders, and they're only going to listen to orders. But the voters are not immovable. I know a lot of our side thinks that they are, but That's because you haven't talked to them. I know. Tons of people who won't believe me on the left. No, they're all in a cult, blah, 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 blah. You say as you repeat the same exact things from our side and never have any independent thinking. What's that? Oh yeah, a cult. Anyway, so you engage the voters that voted for Donald Trump. Remember, a lot of them aren't even MAGA. A lot of them are tons of independents out there. You engage the voters and help them push Republican politicians to vote no against Trump's agenda, or move Trump to being so unpopular that he wants to get back to being popular because he's vain, and you use his ego in a positive way to try to effectuate the things that you want. And that would be, I would argue, a smart, rational strategy. And there are many things and then when you say, okay, and then we get into binary thinking. A lot of folks go, are you saying that you should just agree with MAGA? Well, because if you agree with MAGA on one thing, that means you have to agree with them on everything.
No, you don't.
No, it doesn't. The only reason you're saying that is because you're doing projection. Because you're saying, no, I am in a cult and I will follow this cult 100%. I will never, ever, ever vary any of my opinions. I will do exactly what the cult orders me to do, right? So you assume they're doing likewise, and oftentimes MAGA has done likewise, especially in Trump's first term.
Yeah, definitely.
But what we're seeing in social media and all of our interactions is, guys, they don't agree with us on at least 90% of stuff, at least 80% of stuff, okay? When you get into the specific policies. But if they say they're anti-war, at least ask them to be anti-war. It doesn't mean they're gonna turn on Trump on day one. It doesn't mean they're gonna turn in 3 weeks. But keep asking the question, wait, I thought we were anti-war. I know I'm anti-war, are you anti-war? And so there's so many different ways that you could try to break through to the voters, to the politicians, etc. But none of them are, I don't know, I hope they do the right thing without me doing anything. I'm just gonna sit here like a lump on a log. No, so that's the establishment Democrats. They're useless, right? And for other folks on the left, please have a strategy. Like if you think the right strategy is just yelling at them, okay, no problem. Tell me what step 2 in that strategy is and what step 3 is, and how do we win? Like if you could show me a strategy where I yell racist at them at the top of my lungs, I'm good at that. And somehow that magically leads to us winning, then I'll do that strategy because I care about the policy, eyes on the prize, right? But no one in their right mind thinks that that's a winning strategy. That's just emotional venting, right? But okay, so that's folks that are online, et cetera, et cetera. The most important thing is the Democrats that are actually in Congress and have power. Are you guys actually gonna do anything? No. Last thing is the one I promised you, which is what was the smart strategy the Republicans have? Look, when they don't listen to the courts, that is a form of a coup. It's a coup against the American system and against the American Constitution. Saying, no, we're not gonna have 3 equal branches anymore. The executive branch has the guns and they will do anything they like. They will ignore Congress, and when the courts tell them not to ignore Congress, they'll ignore the courts. That's a constitutional coup against America. So what are the Republicans doing already? They're using the word coup against the Democrats. Just like Trump did with fake news. He originally did the fake news on Facebook, his campaign team did, and then he blamed the Democrats and the mainstream media for fake news.
Yeah.
And they're doing it ahead of time. They know they're doing a constitutional coup, so they're going around going, oh yeah, the Democrats, coup. I don't even understand their logic. What are you calling a coup? It makes no sense at all. But it doesn't have to make sense. By the time the idiot Democratic senators figure out, oh, it's a constitutional coup, and they say it, it'll look like they were copying the Republicans. Now, first I point that out because it's a brilliant strategy. But secondly, think about it. The Republicans are so prepared.
They are. It's so obvious.
They prepared these plans for years and years and years. They prepared their media strategy. They prepared their policy, et cetera. And our side is going around, and like we told you yesterday on the show, Hakeem Jeffries went to Silicon Valley to meet with billionaire donors and basically asked them, what should I do?
Mend fences.
Oh, it's just pathetic, man.
Yeah.
So look, guys, that doesn't mean give up on the Democrats. It means insist on a strong populist Democrat that's actually gonna represent you and the policies you love. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.